Hello and welcome to the next episode of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Roosh, high school teacher in Los Angeles. And I moved to Los Angeles in 2006 after being born and raised in Pennsylvania because I came out here for a visit and we drove up the PCH and I was like, this place is incredible. And my buddy who moved out here to do stand-up comedy was like, you can move here. Like people, it's open, like you can come here. And I was like, I guess so. So I moved out here. And I have a very love-hate relationship with this state because I love it. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And I don't like the way that it's run. So my guest today, I'm guessing is kind of in a similar boat as me. And my guest is Major Williams. He is a candidate for the gubernatorial election in 2022 for governor of California. Major Williams, thank you for coming on the show. I'm really excited to talk to you, not just about your plan for California and your background and things like that, but also specifically about education, because I'm very biased and I believe that we fix the education system, we can fix all of a society's problems and things like that. So first of all, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. And tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, because I was doing like a Google search to try and prepare for this, and there's not a lot. And I think that's really important that my audience, everyone gets to know you, where you come from, what were your experiences in life that led you up to this place today?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you again for having me on and, to be able to talk about the educational platform. I'm always excited about as well, because I believe, similar to what you said, it creates a ripple effect. When we put emphasis and focus on education, it's kind of like an unintended consequence, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
In regards to remedies, a lot of things that's happening. But as far as me, my story is somewhat similar. I came out to California over 22 years ago on a visit. And for me, on the third day, I met an amazing woman, ended up marrying that woman, and just never decided to go back to my hometown, which is Dallas, Texas. But even before then, as far as background-wise, I started in the entrepreneur field very early, even though it wasn't like a word back when I started. I know to cut yards and sell candy and car incense at the car wash. So I've always had a very entrepreneurial spirit and business spirit. And I tell people one of the main reasons why that is that I enjoy eating hamburgers, and going to the local store. And so I had to fund my habit, so to speak. And that's kind of how that came about. I went to school at 3 different colleges. I was blessed to have a variety of experience when it comes to education. I went to Trinity Valley Community College in Athens, Texas for 1 year. Played basketball there as well as a freshman. From there, I transferred as a walk-on Pell Grant student at Louisiana Tech University. Attempted to play ball, but because of certain health issues, wasn't able to kind of like fulfill that. But I ended my playing career, educational career at Eastfield College in Mesquite, Texas. So although I did get my degree, I did spend 4 years in college before I made the decision to try to think like a lot of other young kids, think I'm going to go to the NBA, and decided to partner with the agency and try that particular route. When that didn't work out, that's actually what made me come to California, because I didn't want to go back home. I was embarrassed, or I just didn't want to hear everybody like, what happened, why you didn't make it. But coming out here ended up changing my life. And, being in the political space for the last 4.5 years was something that it transgressed, should I say, into that. Because one of the foundational roots of why I ran for mayor of Pasadena back in 2018, and currently now running for governor, is just the foundational mindset of, like you said, I love this state. And for me, it's given me all the victories, the highs and lows, appreciations of failure, the learning opportunities. So it is a love-hate type of relationship that you develop with this place. But at the same time, I always use this reference. I saw myself, like a lot of other Californians, in the stands of frustration, right? Yeah. In the stands of frustration, you're always looking out into the game of life, the game of politics, and saying, you know what, if I were this person, I would do this. If I was a coach or if I was a player, I would do this. And so it took a moment of me looking into the mirror and acknowledging that moment. And then I just decided to become a player versus being a spectator in our political arena. And fast forward, here we are now, 22 months into running for a gubernatorial race, one of the fastest rising Republican candidates in California's most recent history, that has kind of blurred the lines, because it's really about me being a Californian, not a Republican. I always tell people I'm a Californian. I just happen to be a conservative, Republican, and Christian, right? So those are all byproducts of who I am. And I think that message and a little bit of what I described about my backstory is that relatable component that kind of propelled me to, at least for people to have a conversation. If I get an opportunity to have a conversation, statistically, my journey and my story is going to connect with people. And I think that's what it's about moving forward.
Yeah, I love I think the Lily Tomlin quote where she said, I would sit back and say, someone needs to do something. And then I realized that I'm somebody, and when you say you're from Texas, it actually makes sense. I talked to my friends who were from Texas. I was like, California needs to bring a little bit of Texas to California. I have always, mentioned you're a Republican. Like I was a registered Democrat in Pennsylvania. And then I moved out to California and I was an independent because you could, vote in the primaries and stuff like that. And I always was like kind of on the left, and people like accuse me because I like push back on some of the left narratives, and they call me a Republican and all this kind of stuff as if it's something terrible. And I was like, well, first of all, I don't subscribe to this idea that being a Republican is terrible. That's first of all. But second of all, I have never voted for a Republican candidate for any office until 2018. And it was only in the local because I am a fan of balance. I like balance. I like the left and the right working together and opposing each other and all that kind of stuff. And the balance is off. It's off here. And if anyone says that it's not, I think they don't have their eyes open. Even people who are very strongly on the left have to recognize that we have a supermajority, and because of that, we don't get the resistance. If you're in the gym, it only works if there's resistance, and that's the same way with ideas. Would that resonate with you?
No, absolutely. I agree. And if you look at some of the policies that are out there for a lot of people at this point right now, we could say that a lot of them are detrimental versus beneficial, right? And if you have such a huge body of people that feel like their voices are going unheard, that's a signal and a red flag in itself. And one of the main things I wanted to kind of interject in this political arena, not being a career politician, that's the first part of it, right? Because if I have done my homework in regards to the last 20 plus months, listening to people, what they're telling us who they want and what they want. And right now they're telling us that I don't care that you've ran a business, successful business for 20 years, built it from the ground up, and you're worth millions of dollars. They're telling us that we don't care if you started in school board, city council, mayor, lieutenant governor, now you qualified to be governor. Because at this point in 2022, we have all the data and the statistics to be able to say that just because you are walking that path or qualified in that academic area doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a great leader, right? And more than anything, I personally feel like that California is missing someone that's just relatable. And once I'm able to break down, which I do all the time, break down the actual role and the purpose of the governor, it changes the dynamics on what qualified is, what it looks like, and where it can come from, which is why when I was running during the recall, one of my favorite quotes was saying that if there was an electrician in the race, I will vote for the electrician because at least the electrician has a culture and a habit of completion. Yeah. If they come to your house or to your business, they can't leave or get the check or the approval unless the job is done. And that's not the culture of politicians. They pass the buck, they hide behind those walls and assistants and everything else and those policies. So if that's my message, I believe that that's something that has resonated with voters more than anything, beyond just saying, hey, I'm qualified because I have lots of money, or I've created this $1 billion company, or I've been doing politics for 20 and 30 years. 20 years ago, 10 years ago, that probably would be the thing that could hook, line, and sink someone. But now that is not the case.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, getting in business, my wife is an entrepreneur, and she, immigrant from the Philippines, came here with almost nothing, grinded, came to California and just work. And as hard as it is to grow a business in California, she was able to do it. And I see that, the job of a politician, essentially in elected office, is to be judicious about who to trust and who not to, work with budgeting. It's all the things that it takes to grow a business. And for people who you talk about entrepreneurship, it's very cool now. I teach high school, and, kids want to be entrepreneurs. They love Shark Tank and Gary Vaynerchuk and stuff like that. But
Right.
it's like, that's like a new thing, but it's like, it's such a grind. It's so cool. It's almost like that Ronnie Coleman with the bodybuilder quote. It's like, everyone wants to be a bodybuilder, but no one wants to lift this heavy ass weight. It's like,
Yeah.
that's the way business is. But so if you're able to do it, then you're able to like, to really like, you're able to create something. You're able to manage something. But you're right. Like, a lot of these politicians, let's take our governor, like, they haven't really built anything, or they were born with such a silver spoon in their mouth that it was just, they had a lot of the hurdles knocked down for them.
Right.
What are you thinking for like to promote entrepreneurship and take away some of these regulations and things that are so hard on businesses in California? Small business owners are just struggling so much, especially since COVID and things like that.
I think it's going to take from, actually being the governor, changing the whole tempo or the theme of how we look at entrepreneurship, and also small business development as well. And it just comes down to support, right? And also reducing those restrictions and regulations and allow them to thrive. It seems as if we're in a culture of hurry up and wait, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
We have stories of businesses that have, they had this conceptual ideal, and they prayed about it. They put together the business plan, and they launched the actual business, only to get a building that they can't move in for like 3-4 months because they're held up with all these delays, restrictions, and regulation. So as the next governor of California, it's going to be exciting because people are going to know that we are open for business. No different than the educational system. Once California, which is still a utopia of all states, right? It's a perfect model of the American dream here in California. But once people know that California is open for business, it's going to dynamically change way faster than what people believe. Because that means that people are going to actually bring more business here. The coach is going to start the shift as well. So I think it's very essential. I think it's very important. But if you're asking me what we can do to change it, it's going to be exactly what you stated: lessening restrictions and regulations, and supporting those individuals to be able to thrive and to succeed, and champion them, in that particular space.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, putting out like the bat signal, like open for business, I think is a great idea. Before we, yeah, because there's so many resources, there's so many people here, and there's so many go-getters here that's just given the opportunity. I mean, people here are frustrating sometimes, but it's almost like they're a product of their environment. I see that with students sometimes. Like, why are you like this? It's like, oh, they're like a product of their environment. Before we get into the education thing, which I really do, like going up against Gavin Newsom. Like, he is the machine. I grew up listening to Rage Against the Machine. I'm like, this is the machine. I mean, just like with his connections and family and both the super PACs, the billionaires, goes to billionaires' weddings and stuff like that. How do you go up against something like that? Because I think people are also like, the recall gave me a lot of hope. I was like, okay, and that was not easy to get going. And then it did, and it got destroyed. And I would just ask people why. It seems like people are choosing the devil they know versus the devil they don't. That's the only thing I can kind of attach onto the reason why, because people aren't stoked about Gavin Newsom, but they're just scared of a Republican. The Republican thing is so scary. And I know there's a lot of educators listening, not a lot of Republican educators, at least in California. And they're so scared of the idea of a Republican in office because of the way that it's been marketed. How do you go up against that? And do you think that's what it is? It's like the label of being from the GOP? I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the key word that you just said when it comes to the GOP, it's marketing. When you have those attachments in mainstream media and also big tech with social media, with the censorship of conservatives and our ideals, then it leaves opportunity for us to kind of be pigeonholed or boxed in, so to speak. So it really comes down to the messenger as well. That's why I tell a lot of people, like, oftentimes, and I'm gonna answer the question, but oftentimes when it comes to candidates, you may have the person that's super smart, like nerdy smart, or just smart, or even rich, successful business. But California is a very unique, dynamic place. And you have to move with certain delicacies and also awareness and empathy and understanding, right? And me understanding that I've been a Republican for 4.5, 5 years. I also was a Democrat, but it was by default. It wasn't because I understood the policies. Like I said, I haven't been in politics for 4.5 years, and I entered under the Republican umbrella only because I was red pilled by a good friend of mine who was running for lieutenant governor at the time, and we had a great conversation. And what I was able to discover through that educational conversation is a laundry list side by side of beneficial policies and detrimental policies.
Yeah.
And I was able to look at those policies and tie them all the way back to when I was a young 13, 14-year-old kid, knowing that my mother had been on welfare for 20 years, right? And knowing that I had conversations with my mother telling me the Democrats love us, but being an adult and understanding why she said that, right? She said that because they were giving her free money. The difference between the GOP and the Democrats is that they market free really well, right?
Yeah.
On the GOP side, we believe in a hand up, not a handout, meaning that I don't want you to give me $100 if I need $100. If you're successful, I want you to show me how you made that $100 so I can duplicate that over and over again and also pass that on to my kids or to my neighbor, right? So it's a huge difference. And I think once you have a GOP candidate that has a bit of appeal, a broader appeal, that relatability aspect of it, and sharing the message in a way where it resonates. I've told people many times on stages with other candidates, I am the only candidate, first of all, has traveled this entire state for the last 22 months. But I'm also the only individual amongst all these candidates that can go into the projects and talk to the young kid with the braids, with the pants sagging. Why can you do that, Major? Well, I used to be that kid, right? Hang out with the soccer dads and the soccer moms. Why? Because that's who me and my wife hang out with when we out there coaching and screaming for the kids to make a great play. But also from having experience in marketing, having experience of dealings at the NBA, entertainment, and working with millionaires and billionaires, I can exist in those spaces because I understand business, I understand creating opportunity and value for those individuals, their companies, their brands, and their products. So if you look at my toolbox, I mean, in any surroundings that I go in, I can be able to craft a message of relatability and add value in those particular spaces. And it's because I have the actual story to go along with it. Oftentimes people get up in this GOP circle, they don't change the narrative of people because they're giving you talking points. And you've heard those same talking points over and over again. Well, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tell you more about myself and my journey on why I believe this is the best route for us moving forward. And we will continue to evolve. You know, it is about us working together. I have the Restore California plan, which is, it's going to have the educational element in there as well. But what I tell people about my plan with my administration, which is going to be a dream team administration, is that we are approaching it from a collaborative effort. As an entrepreneur, that's in my DNA. I enjoy think tanks. I enjoy taking new information. So, because a lot of these people understand that's what helps you expedite the project and getting it actually done. Right? A lot of people wait on the sidelines because they, from a singular place, want to come up with the ideal, or they want to work with only their people or their professionals. The reason why I know so much about agriculture is because I actually traveled to the Central Valley at least 10 times, sitting with families, sitting with the agriculture industry, sitting with the truckers and understanding their plights and letting them educate me. So now if I'm ever asked about it, I'm well versed in it, because it's not that I'm this super smart guy and I know this. No, I'm actively listening to what the people are saying, what they want, and also the solutions that they're offering, for those plights. So I think it's going to come down to the GOP just being strong with their messaging, but also just having great candidates that are able to speak life against some of the negativity that comes towards the GOP.
But that's the fact that you can relate to all of these different types of Californians is really crucial, because California, something I've noticed is it's a very diverse state in all the ways that people can be diverse, but it's very segregated. Yeah. I taught in East LA, and I had 17-year-old kids who were 20 minutes from the beach and never been to the beach, never saw the ocean. They were 17. And now I teach in the West Side, and I have kids who have never been to the hood, never actually sat down and had a conversation with a black kid before. It's really, really not good. You go to a lot of, yeah.
I'll share a quick story with you. When I was running for mayor of Pasadena, and I was talking to this interviewer off camera, and he wanted to ask me this once he actually interviewed me, because his mind was blown. And his question was like, how did you deal with racism in Texas? Growing up in Texas, I guess he had a certain perspective of how it was in Texas, rednecks or whatever, right? A lot of racism, right? And he was blown away by my answer. And I said, I've never experienced it. But here's the but part though. He asked me, have I ever been called the N-word? All that. I said, no, never, right? But just like you said, I never left my hood. I never left my community. So even if it existed, I never was in a position or a place to be able to receive that. And I didn't receive it until I went off to college in Louisiana Tech, and that was only once. But, so that's what I'm saying. I agree with you in regards to some of these kids don't even stray out, 20 minutes away from their communities or whatnot. So.
Yeah, I mean, the racism here, if you want, like, it's different. It's like a patronizing. I have a friend who grew up in Gary, Indiana, and all black community that he grew up in Gary, and it was like there was also like that kind of like almost like what was perceived as like the redneck type of like racist in Indiana, like rural Indiana. But he said he moved to Sherman Oaks in LA, and he's like, it's a different kind. It's a very much like I'll take care of you kind of racism. It's like the paternalistic kind of like racism of like the, super wealthy elite, mostly Democrat elite, have that kind of element of it. I just want to say to my audience listening that's nervous about having a Republican governor, if we have a Republican governor, guys, we get back to the yin yang that we need, because what we get is there's going to be a lot of Democratic mayors. There's going to be a lot of the state assembly is going to be all Democrat and stuff like that. But if you have a Republican governor, now you get some of that balance. You get some of that pushback. And that's kind of ideal, right? I mean, the ideal would be, I wouldn't want to be in a state that has Republican from top to bottom across the supermajority either. I want the balance. And I think for people who are listening, they're like, oh, I'm nervous about having a Republican governor. It's like, it's better to have a Republican governor if you have Democrat everything else. I just think that that's an important message for people who are maybe nervous about that. Like, you're not going to lose all of your more left, liberal ideals. You're not, because of one position.
Right. And that's true. And that's why I think it's more so, like Martin Luther King said, it's more so about the content of your character. At the end of the day, if you look at the track record of what I've done in the last 20 months, and also the last 4 years, going out there in those communities, having those meaningful conversations. So I'm coming in fresh with a lot of great ammunition and ideals and enthusiasm. When is the last time we had someone from a leadership perspective that had enthusiasm, that was going to take social media into Sacramento behind the curtains, that was going to be engaging, playing ball with the kids, that's going to be just popping up at local donut shops and other places, giving people encouragement, giving them opportunities, working with nonprofits and organizations, being an ally and an advocate for them to be able to fundraise and raise funds and give them great infrastructure. There are no stories that exist that are out there currently that could tell you those tales. It doesn't exist. Yeah. So if you have someone like myself that comes from the very diverse background that I have as far as in entertainment, I used to be a music artist, for crying out loud. I was a guy who pants was sagging and making rap music, but then I also was a guy that grew up in the church as well. Being in the South, you go to church 13 times every week, and so I never lost that core values. And, and I just think that adds that relatability aspect of it. I changed my life 12 years ago and started to change my life and make those necessary moments, necessary, movements for myself to, kind of remold my character. Because when you grow up as a Democrat, I tell a lot of people, and it's not like a diss, it was my personal experience. It was everybody else's fault that I wasn't successful in certain things but my own. There's no accountability, because as you said, it's like, oh, it's not your fault, it's their fault. No, it's my fault. It was a choice that I made, and I have to pay for that particular consequence, right? And so from a conservative view, it's just so much more accountability. It's so much more strength. It's so much more visibility, in the sense that I want to see you do well. I don't look at anyone ever and get envious. I get excited, inspired, and motivated, and maybe, look at them as a distant mentor, or even probe them and ask them questions about certain things they've accomplished. And maybe that's something I can add to my repertoire, so me and my wife and my kids can work on this as well. And I think that's a different type of conversation that even your viewers, they probably haven't heard anyone speak this way. And for me, it's not rehearsed. It's just me speaking. This is just what I talk about. And I've been talking this way for the last 20 years in a variety of settings.
Yeah, we were talking about the marketing. There are some Republicans who are harsh and they're cold. They're not very gracious, and they just want to like own libs and stuff like that. The same way that there's a lot of Christians who do really disgusting, hurtful, divisive things, and it ruins the kind of it for all of them. I love Arthur Brooks. His book on The Conservative Heart is really good, or Love Your Enemies, because it's all about how conservative ideas are going to help the people that you want to help. Obviously, I mean, I'm a Christian. I believe that if you follow the words of Christianity, I think if you actually follow them, I think it'll bring a lot of good to the world. It's just there are people who are lost within the GOP, within Christianity, and of course within the Democratic Party too. And that doesn't speak for all people in those groups, but it's you have to be able to cut through these like stereotypes of people who belong to these groups and things like that, and kind of look for them as the individual, as you mentioned.
I agree, but I also want to finish touching on when you said like how do you defeat, or how do you compare to a giant in a machine like Governor Gavin Newsom?
Yeah.
And so I was going to wrap up and say, I understand marketing, advertising, influence, motivational, inspirational. And I think my story has been able to transcend the Republican base. Why? Because that relatability aspect of it. He has never faced anyone that came in that had a movement behind him that felt like a hit record. And I always use that analogy because a hit record transcends through all races, parties. It's just a hit record of relatability. Whenever that record comes on, you can't help your knee is moving or your fingers are snapping. Like, it's just something about that song. And so I knew I had to start early because I had to break through the traditional programming of what people believe that qualified is as a candidate, as a governor. And we've been able to fine tune to be able to do that. And another way that it's working, they're being able to see my consistency. They've seen me have highs and lows during this campaign. They've seen me fail. They've seen me get back up. They've seen me be strong, courageous, and consistent. And so that in itself has given me a track record that makes me more relatable to, like, that's your story, right? Oh, I've been through that. Oh, I can respect that. Or I may not agree with that, but I can respect the fact that you have heart, right? So creating a massive movement, getting people excited, being accessible, engaging with people in a way like no other candidate or even the current governor has, there is an opportunity. But at the end of the day, it has to be a balance. It definitely has to get funded. And that's where the obstacles come in when he already has $30 million in the bank.
Yeah, and it's the people who are more on the left side of this political spectrum would say, like, let's get the money out of politics and it's unfair and stuff like that. It's like, yeah. So let's give people who don't have access to these, billionaire opulent weddings and stuff like that they're always going to, and French laundry and whatnot. Like, let's give the people who don't have access to that a shot. Like you're being manipulated by the system that you're trying to push back against. As far as education goes, Major, I have taught in LA for 16 years, and I taught at charter schools. We have charter schools here. The public school system, I have a lot of friends in the public school system still, in like the bigger non-charter schools. It's a mess. I've been at a bunch of different kinds of schools. I was at Bill and Melinda Gates funded school. It had a lot of money, but the culture wasn't there and it failed. I ended up where I'm at now is a religious private school, and I never would have thought I would be there, but I'm there because it was the place where I could do my job. I wasn't just bound to, like, I have to teach this for 2 weeks and then that for 2 weeks. And I was like, what if a kid asks a question? I've had kids ask questions. Mr. Rich, can we go over this a little bit more? I'm like, sorry, Johnny, can't do it. We don't have time. It's like, but I'm curious. I want to learn. Sorry, you can't be curious. Like, it was bad. It was really unfortunate. And I believe, as I said in the beginning, I believe education will solve everything. So what are your thoughts on how to approach education in California to get us back on the right track. And this is really like the biggest thing that I want to talk to you about. So I'm really excited to hear just your thoughts on the education system, some ideas that you have, to bring maybe some like, more free market ideas into it or whatnot, because the teachers unions and tenure and the way that it is now, the politicization of it, where all these teachers are like activist teachers and stuff like that. I know that very well. It's not good. The education in California is not good. You look at the literacy rates, you look at that kind of stuff. It's not good. And it's hurting the children. So right. Please just take it away. Like, what are your thoughts on education? What are your plans? What are you thinking about when it comes to my field?
So I believe it's one of the, if not the most important aspect of what we need to put energy and attention to when it comes to the education, because of course, this is something dealing with our next generation. Given the fact that we do have, I believe we're rated right now at 47th, in the nation when it comes to our education system. So some of the ideals that I've been able to gather that I think would be helpful is going to be, of course, there's multiple layers to it, because it's just not a magic one or a quick fix. But I do believe that we have to have like real conversations, and we need to address the teachers union as well, the teachers union. So I posed a question. I said, do we have meaningful conversations to try to see if I'm just in my administration or we're great enough to go in there and change some things, right? Because it is like a wall in a mini government in itself, right? Or do we work against them and take up time, and that's going to hurt the actual kids? So one of the middle grounds that I see is being someone as a leader and a governor that's supportive of school choice. Now, if you want to start a ripple effect when it comes to education, allow parents and students the opportunity to choose the best place that they feel comfortable, and that's going to be accessible to the information that they want to receive. And also believe the proponent of school choice and those funds being able to carry on with the kids is going to be a game changer as well, economically, for the parents and for the students moving forward if they want to have extended education, whether it be trade school or even off to college as well. I think we have to bring back the basics when it comes to education. I believe there's too much personal interjection. As you said, we have these activists that are projecting their own personal ideals into kids. Kids are going to school from a moral place or educational place from their parenting, from their parents, but they're going off and coming back, different kids and different students. And the only way a kid should come back home is smarter in the knowledge, in the academics, versus all these other things that have been pushed upon them in society. Now, given the fact, we're all human, life is ever changing and flowing like water, but I think we need to reset the foundation on how we approach it. And as the next governor of California, I won't come in saying that I have it all figured out. The beautiful thing about my administration and the Restore California plan, which is what I talked about, is going to be an inclusive, collaborative effort, right? And so what better way to try to bridge the gap and adding value to the situation by talking to people like yourself and other individuals, so we can start mapping out the proper way to move forward together. Because at the end of the day, the question has to be asked to everyone. Do you care about the kids and their future? Okay, if you say yes, we start off on a positive note. So if we have a foundation of a yes, a foundation on a positive note, then let's start trying to find some more yeses so we can actually come together. But when it comes down to curriculum, having great teachers, committed teachers as well, is something that we have to address. And there are some that are on autopilot, and teachers are human. They get burnt out, they get tired like anyone else. And we need to acknowledge that, because if that's the case, you're going to be hurting some students that are there for an opportunity. And that's going to be something they carry over to the next grade or the grade that they don't get to. You just never know. So that's kind of like my take on it prematurely. But I do look forward to having an amazing dream team of collaborators to help us remedy a lot of it. But the first thing that I would interject or support legislation-wise is school choice.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Corey DeAngelis. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's really at the forefront of the funding students, not funding schools kind of stuff. You know, trying to just like, so the government allocates, I think in California it's something like $9,800. I might be wrong. Or in LA, it's like something like per student. That's how much it costs for public school. Essentially, you can get that money to you instead of the schools. Then you can go off and do different school choices. And it's a complex thing because you don't want to take funding away from public schools and blah, blah, blah. But there's a problem when there's too much bureaucratic overhead. There's too much.
Well, real quick, the thing about the taking the funding from the schools, now here's the opportunity. As I said, evolution happens. Now it's the opportunity for public schools to compete. There's nothing wrong for them to compete with the charters, with the private schools. For so long, the public schools have been comfortable in their element. Where now we're at a different place. As companies have to evolve, as families and parenting styles have to change with each child because their personalities are different, the public school system has to evolve as well too, because what's more enticing now? The quality of school that the charter schools or the private schools, the kids are doing agriculture, they're learning how to create bank accounts, whatever. The school system has to evolve as well, and it comes with leadership, better principals, better administrators, and also better teachers and instructors that's going to champion and that's going to help them attract the best talent. It's no different. And that's what we are at this point. I would hope they would think that.
Yeah, I mean, if without competition, you're just going to become stagnant. You're not going to get better. And we know that in so many different fields. And education is just so important. You know, there's some jobs, policing is another one. There's just some jobs that we almost can't afford to have bad teachers, bad officers, whatever it is. Like, we got to find a way to get them out. I didn't want to take up too much of your time. I really appreciate you here. You know, you're up against so much. You're like David against Goliath to some degree. What can people do to try and find out more, support what you're doing, things like that? Because it's what I tell my students, like, you could have the best idea ever, but if you don't have a way to communicate to people or reach people, it doesn't go anywhere. And, you know, I mean, if you are the best candidate for us in moving forward as a state, you're up against all of this other stuff, and you have skills, you have abilities, you're using social media, all that kind of stuff, which is the way to do it. But there's still the real financial issue here, and other things of just like, you know, the name recognition and things like that. So how can people help get involved, learn more and everything like that about what you're doing?
I believe, you know, the first thing is to decide if I am someone that you want to support by going to the website, majorforgovernor.com. Of course, follow me on social media at Major Williams for Governor or at Major Williams, which is my personal site. And then from that standpoint, it really comes down to the micro. Sometimes people believe that if they can't give $100 or $20, that, you know, they have nothing to offer. Well, your conversation about me and the campaign is very helpful. So just make it a point, you know, get people together and create a challenge each other and have fun with it. You know what? I'm going to share 5 pieces of Major Williams content today. Beat that, guys, right? Make it fun, make it engaging, tag other influencers, celebrities, podcasts, or journalists that you know have relationships with, tag them on our posts via social media as well. You know, if you can't donate $5, right? Go and tell 5 other people to donate $1. That's your contribution to the campaign, right? We have to be creative. And that's one of the things that I tell everyone. You know, I'm hoping that my message is inspiring people to be actionable and take themselves out of the stands of frustration and become players versus being spectators. And that's what this really is about in this election. This election can be won, but we can no longer be spectators in this game. Yeah. We can only win if we become players, and it's possible. So if you make it a point, just one single person say, I'm going to contact 50 people, right? And those 50 people, I'm going to empower and hopefully inspire to get 50 people as well. That's how it continues to multiply. That's the conversation each and every person has with the next person. Tell 50 people, right? Tell 50 people to donate $5, $20 or whatever. Tell 50 people to repost his most recent post or whatever, or just reach out to us. If you have a backyard, you know, and you want to host a meet and greet, reach out to us and let's coordinate it and get some family members and friends and let's make it happen. Let's celebrate the opportunity for us to make some real effective change here in our state and bring relatability back in. As you said, you know, entrepreneurship wasn't the thing many years ago, but it is now. Politics has to become fun. It has to become informative. It has to become cool. I was playing basketball in Redding, California, and you know, I was a little fatigued, and the kids were messing with me. One of my guys were with me, which is one of my pastors, and he was like, "What's wrong? We only played one game." And I looked at the kid. I said, "Well, you know, one of the main reasons why I'm running for governor is because Gavin Newsom has shut down the gyms for a year, so I'm so out of shape right now, and I'm really frustrated." But then I said, you know, I am 45 years old, and literally everybody broke out. It's like, "Oh my gosh, are you kidding me, right?" But before then, I was just like the coolest guy ever. I still was, I guess, but they just couldn't believe that they had the opportunity to share a moment with the candidate that's running for governor of California, and he's like the cool guy. And that conversation traveled across that entire city amongst all those young people and new voters, right? And so there's not a lot of conversations and opportunities out there that are like that. So we try to create those moments. But if people want to help, you know, be creative, reach out to us, majorforgovernor.com, info@theofficeofmajorwilliams.com is our email. We're open and receptive to creative ideas and opportunities to help us get the word out and also to fundraise.
Yeah, I mean, don't be indifferent, guys. Like you can't be indifferent when it comes to your life, raising a family in this state and stuff like that. Just get involved, be civically engaged, you know. And this is Cylinder Radio, so it's all about viewpoint diversity and looking at all angles and stuff like that. I think having, you know, a Republican candidate on would be follow that. But also, you seem like someone who is open to having debates and conversations with like your fellow candidates. Like if they want to like challenge you to like, "Hey, let's talk about the issues," I feel like you'd be like, "Yeah, like let's go." And the fact that far too many candidates go, "I'm not going to engage on these issues," or something like that, and you I mean, am I just assuming this? Am I assuming this right? That you take on these challenges, like you will have a conversation with people on these issues openly because you want to put out your ideas, and you don't want to vote from someone who doesn't want to vote for you. Like you want to put your ideas out there, and if they resonate with people, then you want their vote. So you'll take on these challenges and things like that. That's what I'm assuming.
No, I agree, because I understand the essential element of earning the opportunity to be of service, right? But I also will say the other side of it. I have spoken. I have spoken against forums and debates in the past, because another aspect of it is that, you know, it is part of the traditional programming. There are individuals they're great at answering questions, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to the work, which is what I said earlier, they can answer, "Oh my gosh, he said that answer is so great," right? But he hasn't done any work to earn your support. And so sometimes it's a little demeaning to be in those spaces, although I welcome it. I was 23 and 2 in college at debate. You know, I could do that. But I more so like the conversation aspect of it as well, one-on-one or even in a group setting. But yeah, I just did one like last week and it went really well. So like I said, I feel two different kind of ways. Of course, I can do it, but I also try to educate voters on what those forums are. They're to sell tickets. It's entertaining for the groups who are putting it together as well. And they'll use our leverage and our social media to kind of promote their thing. And so, you know, I like town halls. You know, town halls is this, you know, a chance to get the questions from you and you can hear directly from me. So if it's a town hall setting, I love those type of atmospheres.
Yeah. And you got ammunition because there's years and years of examples of bad policy being implemented, and they can't point to that at you. Like you haven't destroyed people's lives. So that's like an advantage, I think, in your side. Major Williams, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time out of this campaign to come talk to a teacher. I really appreciate it. I really do. And I hope that people who are listening will go check you out and see what you're all about and get engaged. Really one way or the other. I'm not here to tell people you are, which you should be, but I'm not here to tell people, you know, who to vote for or anything like that. Like this is up to you. But the fact that you are willing to come on here and talk to me, I think speaks volumes. So thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it.
For sure. And thank you for what you're doing as well, too. Anytime I get an opportunity to speak to or see or meet a teacher who actually cares about being a teacher cares about the kids and the direction that their lives are going to be going in. I just kind of, I get the pom-poms out, man. And I just applaud you guys because it's not an easy job, different than like with law enforcement as well. But you take that battle every single day and go out there and deal with those different complexities and different personalities and figure out a way to still mold our young people to hopefully become their best selves, moving towards adulthood. So I appreciate you as well.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, sir.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.